Welcome to the AI for You Cafe.
Thank you, Carmen, for having me, and thank you for the brief introduction. I'm first going to take all of you through the presentation, but would really love to discuss whatever you find relevant and provoking or maybe urgent in the context of creative and societal AI applications. For the beginning, WACH, where I work, is a public research organization with a team of about 60 researchers and makers working with citizens as a research community. We have a track record of more than 50 European projects in the last 10 years, within mainly Horizon, but as well as Creative Europe and Erasmus Plus programs. Most of them cross understanding and use a variety of technologies within societal, public, and cultural contexts. Let me start this presentation with the legacy of artistic engagements into the computing technologies with English mathematician, a woman named Ada Lovelace, who helped Charles Babbage publish the first algorithm to be carried out by his analytical engine in 1842. At the time, it was quite revolutionary that machines have applications beyond pure calculation. She called the idea poetical science. Quoting, the analytical engine might act upon other things beside number. The engine might compose elaborate and scientific pieces of music of any degree of complexity or extent. Fast forward into 1920s, Czech writer Karl Čapek wrote a theater play about robots, describing the type of humans not only as machines that act like humans, but also humans that act like machines, reduced to machines controlled by rhythms of factory production lines or dictatorial state systems. That was a time of an early fascination over the emerging technological and industrial world, yet observing the same machine used through the First World War raised also quite some concerns. Similar concerns, especially the quality of relations between humans and the industrial machine, was raised by the film Modern Times, written and directed by the American comedian Charlie Chaplin. There he is subjected to such of being force-fed by a malfunctioning feeding machine and an accelerating assembly line where he screws nuts at an ever-increasing rate onto pieces of machinery. He finally suffers a nervous breakdown and runs amok, getting stuck within the machine and throwing the factory into chaos. Again, fast forward to late 1960s, to the first computer exhibition, computer art exhibition, the Cybernetic Serendipity, opened in London in 1968. With displays of kinetic and computer art, visual and music. Same year, there was also another equally important exhibition organized by the New Tendencies movement, the Tendencies 4 in Zagreb in 1968. Both exhibitions displayed artworks beyond the plain representation of the world that surrounds us, so like landscapes and portraits. From the avant-garde tradition of 1920s, the artworks were becoming emancipated from the representation, kind of an entities with their own inner dynamics and own agencies. In this context, early computing technologies offered opportunities to program these agencies in the form of algorithms and applied in aesthetic or visual way. Early computer artists in the 60s and 70s understood the algorithmic production of works as the creation of programmable cybernetic, and generative aesthetics. Furthermore, quoting one of the pioneers of generative aesthetics, Frieder Neyck, the argument is simple. There are no masterpieces in computer art, because computer art is not about production of pieces. It's about production of system designs and about the beauty and coherence of these designs. In other words, it's the method, not the artifact, that is relevant for the aesthetic judgment of a work. At the same time, in the mainstream narrative, we observe concepts like HAL 9000, a computer character in the film 2001 Odyssey, The Space Odyssey by Stanley Kubrick. Film on one side demonstrated this mainstream idea of technological intelligence, a brain emancipated from humans, but also entitled to judge human behavior from techno-deterministic position that technology knows best, yet experiencing its own fatal error. A short anecdote: IBM, who was providing the narrative and some computer parts for the film, before the premiere of in 1968, cancelled involvement into the film, saying that IBM computers don't break. One of the dichotomies that we observe in art is also differentiation between machine art, so fascination and representation of technologies, and art machines, machines that produce art. This effort went mostly in the direction of understanding the human condition expressed through technologies. Early in the 20th century, mostly through mechanics, and later through media and information technologies. An example of early art producing machine is Harold Cohen's Aaron. Based on his paper from 1971 up to 1980s, he developed a program with a small set of rules and forms that the computer composed into drawings, which were then put to paper using a drawing turtle, a small robot equipped with a marker. Of the early version of Aaron, Cohen wrote, "In all its versions prior to 1980, Aaron dealt exclusively with internal aspects of human cognition. It was intended to identify the functional primitives and differentiations used in the building of mental images, and consequently in the making of drawings and paintings. The program was able to differentiate, for example, between figure and ground, and inside and outside, and to function in terms of similarity, division, and repetition. Without any object-specific knowledge of the external world, Aaron constitutes a several limited model of human cognition, yet the few primitives it embodied proved to be remarkably powerful in generating highly evocative images, that suggested without describing an external world. So all these presented works are fundamental for the understanding of the current state of AR art production. So fast forward again to the times of AI winter, artists today continue using all mentioned art methodologies, making invisible visible and research technological ontologies. Mimo Akten, work from 2017, The Gloomy Sunday, demonstrates neural network aesthetics in somehow banal, yet not blasphemic way. An artificial neural network looks out onto the world trying to make sense of what it's seeing in context of what it's seen before. But it can only see through the filter of what it already knows, just like us. Because we too see things not as they are, but as we are. Here I would like to show the video of this work because it's more and better understood how the artwork works.
Sadly, one Sunday, I waited and waited with clouds in my arms for the dream I created. I waited till dreams like my heart were all broken. The flowers were all dead, and the words were unspoken. The grief that I knew was beyond all consoling. The beat of my heart was a bell that was tolling. Saddest of Sunday.
Okay, I believe you got the picture. Next piece, again, as mentioned, art makes invisible visible. The group on Formative developed a real-time visualization of hydrogeological model of rivers through deep time. Algorithms that usually remain hidden in the process through such artworks become an object of observation and admiration. And just for a better understanding, it's a display of 6 high-resolution screens, usually placed in quite nice places. But what is behind are, on one side, Earth observation images of Earth landscape, but also the model. So it's not a plain video animation, but it literally follows a model as it's understood by scientists, how rivers evolve through time. So it's backed by science and shown as art. Let's go on. By Adam Harvey is a functional computer vision toolkit for human rights researchers and investigative journalists. The artist is training the application with all known explosive devices used in Syria to bridge the gap between the state-of-the-art artificial intelligence used in the commercial sector and make it accessible and tailored to the needs of human rights researchers and investigative journalists working with large video and image data sets. Also, just to give you a bit of insight of this work, you can find all of this online as well, with all the resources. Most of these projects are open source. So VFrame has behind all the synthetic data where he models all these bombshells, displaying how the images from Syria are used to teach the algorithms. So everything is explained. And the whole purpose of the project is to explain the process, how machine learning and neural networks work. Oh, yeah, and there's also another project by Adam and also Jules Laplace, the megapixels. This project is kind of ongoing, and it's independent art and research publication that investigates the ethics, origins, and individual privacy implications of the face recognition in training data sets, and the role in expansion of biometric surveillance technologies. Both projects dissect machine learning technologies by studying the ethics and politics of data sets as a potentially controversial resource of knowledge production. Let's move on. The Normalizing Machine by Mushon, Israel artist, is an experiment in machine learning and algorithmic prejudice. As an interactive installation identifies and analyzes the image of social normalcy. Each participant is asked to point out who looks most normal from a lineup of previously pre-recorded art participants. The machine analyzes the participant decisions and adds them to its aggregated algorithmic image of normalcy. So this work and similar projects touch the question of what is normal, what is biased by default, and what is exclusive by default. So these are questions that artists research through these artworks, but also enable visitors to be part of this process by choosing and deciding what is normal and what is biased, and in this way experience these notions. The next project, just a second, the Street Swipe project is working on the question of trying to understand gentrification in cities. They're using street view images of restaurant window fronts in Amsterdam. And on exhibitions, visitors can decide which images are or represent gentrification and which represent indigenous dwellers of these restaurants. And in this way, again, participate and provide labor, but also experience the challenge of bias, because it's hard to determine what is what. So it's kind of a public interface into the AI system. This last project, the Street Swipe, was part of the European Artificial Intelligence Lab, a consortium of more than 10 cultural venues, art producers, and cultural research institutions. And we have about 500,000 of annual visitors in our festivals, exhibitions all around Europe. We also, as WAAG, we are part of the consortium of European Stars Initiative, developed through the Horizon ICT efforts in the last 4 years. STARS here stands for Science, Technology, and Arts. And the whole initiative is based on the recognition that the world of 21st century is emerging in form of these crossover challenges that no knowledge domain can cope with by itself. The case with technologies like AI is that they are simultaneously reshaping not only economy, but also society and environment. So within these efforts of STARS initiative, the European Commission and the broader community of artists, researchers, and cultural venues take effort of creative research and innovation, contributing completely new insights for new societally relevant technologies. One of the pillars of STARS initiative is STARS Prize, and every year we award 2 collaborative works And last year, in 2019, one addressed also the topic of AI. Project Elias very directly addresses concerns about assistive technologies. We say if it's not open, you don't own it. Smart devices remain mystery for the users, a black box with inputs and outputs, with mics and speakers. Bjorn Carman addressed this issue by developing an alias to Google Home. What it does, it plays random noise when you don't use it, and only when you call it by your choosing custom name, it activates. In this way, it prevents Google to listen to your home when you don't want it. The anatomy of AI system was a nominee of the last year's Starts Prize. The usual portrait of AI usually comes as a super smart brain emancipated and elevated above the reality, yet what it is a vast infrastructure enabled by material and labor resources. Kate Crawford and Vladan Yoler made a large-scale map investigating the human labor, data, and planetary resources required to build and operate an Amazon Echo. While AI appears invisible to users, art makes it visible. The post-humanistic discourse of new materialities is researching technologies in a very material way, trying to understand the material, labor, and data used in the process. In this way, artists don't only use given technologies, but try to overcome biases and characteristics inherited by designs. Artists like Spela Petric research planned AI interfaces, challenging not only how can technology become more human, but also non-human. She's overcoming the notion that we need to humanize technology because we know that technology is a very human thing. She's developing an AI that will think that it's a plant. This is an effort of something that we call the environmental intelligence, recognizing the capacity where environmental or societal actors actively participate their own agencies and not by covered observations. In overall, what artists do, they research technologies and reference science in the field of public concerns. They understand the human, not as a user or consumer, but as a citizen. And artworks, or especially artistic research, mostly happens in the field of so-called public services. I mean, let's try to understand cultural applications, artworks, performances, films as something that represents public service, but also in a dialogue with market applications, with industries, and trying to understand these relations and trying to establish dialogue, and in this way making technologies more societally not just acceptable but also more relevant, because we as citizens we might not find all the solutions on market, and we need to develop them by themselves, and we can do that only by using open technologies, being able to open existing technologies, work with them, use them from inside out, and not just in commodified way as users or consumers. That would be it. So if you have any questions, I'm more than open to discuss questions of art, questions of ethics, even politics of technologies. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mia. I
Pleasure.
will, of course, take the floor first because I'm very, very interested in your talk. But I would also again ask my audience and our audience to please put your questions into the question board on the right side. Raise your hand, I can see it, and then I give you the mic. My first question is, now we heard a lot about Bach and we heard about artists you introduced, but I didn't hear what you, Mia, are actually working on right now. What is your project?
I mean, one of my personal efforts is to provide conditions for artists to work with AI technologies. That's why trying to develop, I mean, we have some frameworks already, but we want to improve them and develop platforms on the crossover between ICT projects and art projects. So we have these two platforms at the moment. One is European AI Lab, that is Creative Europe project with more than 10 partners. Within this project, in the last year, we organized 2 residencies. One was shown with this street swipe project that was developed by Dutch artists, Aesthetics of Exclusion. And another one was art residency at European Space Agency, also on topic of how to use AI in envisioning going into outer space. And on the other side, bringing together START's initiative and AI for EU. So how to provide conditions for artists to work with capacities of AI for EU, for example. I mean, because that's it's becoming a platform to go for AI applications and for AI resources. So that's, let's say, one of the efforts in this context that I'm quite dedicated at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Now I give the floor to the audience and to the participants. And Alessandro Yotti, he asked, this is his question. You mentioned the concerns raised in WW at World War II. What are the sociality risks for in this art? Can the marriage of arts and machines produce propaganda? That's the question.
So I didn't hear well. Can you read again? Because there were huge interruptions.
There is somehow an echo. I will try again. You mentioned the concerns raised by seeing machines used in World War II. What are the societal risks of using machines for, in, or with art? For example, can the marriage of arts and machines produce more dangerous instruments of propaganda?
So what artists are doing is they try to make technologies understandable. They try to, they provide, through artworks, they provide interfaces to see technologies inside out, to experience in public space, especially those parts of technologies that bring some concerns. So wherever there's concern regarding technology, artists produce a work on that topic. So this topic can be discussed in public. And what platforms like Bach or others do, we provide conditions for dialogue between developers or those with interests and those with concerns. And our main agenda and artists' main agenda is not just to bring out these controversies, but also question how can we take care of these concerns? What do we need to do? What's the next step when these concerns arise? And together with artists, together with these artworks, we provide a discourse, we provide discussion in a public way. That's it.
Okay, thank you. I hope Alessandro it's okay. As I say, you can also raise your hand. Now, the next question is from Orde Gilbert. To what extent can average citizens open up the black box of AI technology?
I mean, citizens recognize a need for open technologies. Of course, black box can never be really opened. In the case of the Elias project, it's shown one of the tactical approaches to black box. So you can hack inputs and outputs, but without intervention into the black box. But at the same time, what we also do, what we find relevant in this context, that citizens engage in using technologies. And when you use technologies, when you are able to work with hardware, even the most basic functionalities, you learn how it functions. And when you learn how it functions, you also equip yourself by understanding it. You become aware of its presence. I mean, one of the obstacles of AI technology is that it's completely invisible. It's represented in our everyday lives mostly through cameras, mics, and speakers and screens. And the whole process happens somewhere in back, on servers, on remote locations. But if citizens develop these kind of systems by themselves, if they use even the most simple applications, like one of the Mimo Aten, the one with this double screen, they become aware how it functions, and in this context, they become empowered, and empowered citizens can demand then, I mean, citizen rights, if you want. They can raise concern and demand, for example, the question of use of AI technologies in public spaces. I mean, that's quite a lot.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And I just now bombard you with more questions because the questions are coming in, and it's always like, this is from Sukesh Kumar Tedla. And once more, Tedla, do you use toolkit or framework for bias detection?
So our art, I mean, at VAG, we don't work on AI per se. Only artists by themselves, they work with these technologies. And so this project, the Street Swipe, was demonstration on how bias is a default state of AI technology. So it's hard to identify bias by itself. It's more crucial to be aware that it exists and then address it. And that's as far as we go in this context. So we don't develop technologies to recognize bias. We go only as far to say there's always a bias. And then you become aware, and then you start to question. We don't develop this kind of technology.
Okay, I think it's important for our participants is to understand that Mark is basically allowing a lot of artists, what I understand, to work and connect to the art. I think that's the idea. No? One can even try to make projects together with artists. It's what I understand. No?
I mean, what we provide is an art science collaboration. Whoever is willing to collaborate with the counterpart, with a fellow scientist or fellow artist that wants to share research questions, that wants to share infrastructure, that wants to share even stage, I would say. That's what we provide, and that's what we try to facilitate, and totally open for this kind of to provide that and facilitate. However, we are not focused only on AI. We work from everything from biotechnologies, questions of genetics, up to outer space technologies, so questions of remote observation and planetary sciences. So we have a very broad scope of sciences on one side, but on the other side also scope from the society to environment. So how we relate one to another and how we understand it.
Yes, just to make it clear that the possibility to collaborate. I have two more questions and one moment, I take this out. From Kai Salmella. Thank you, Mia, for this presentation. You got me interested of the AI and arts. Is there any forum, team, or group where interested parties can find more information, contact to artists, etc.? That's the question.
Yeah, so very simple. My email is available, so I'm available to provide all quite near some opportunities already in February. So in Grenoble, we have one festival showing few works on AI as well, because it's the next event in our European AI network. I think that's on from 12th to 16th of February in Grenoble. I think it's Experimenta Festival. Then we have starts residency days in Paris from 28th of February to the 1st of March, where we show about 80 artworks, installations, films, performances, and few of them also touch the topic of AI, but they all cross this science, technology, and arts approach. So if you reach out to me by email, I will definitely provide you information.
Here's directly my question, Mia. Again, me, Carmen. Is it free to go in Paris to the exhibition at Pompidou, or do we need invitations from you, or how does it work?
That's all public programs, so everything is, yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a free entry, but of course, that's a public program that anyone can visit, that's for sure.
Okay, great. So then another question. It's from Jose de Medeiros. Hi, Mia, thanks for your presentation. It just occurred to me to ask you the following question. In terms of copyrights, is the art produced by machines with the help of AI treated the same as a software program copyrights? In fact, how is the current state of the art of IP legislation where it comes to art produced in this way? Shall I repeat?
Yeah, I totally understand it. Yeah. Art is made by authors, so it's protected. But at the same time, artists often publish, especially this computer art, as open, accessible code. And we have one of the controversial works, especially in AI, the one that was sold on for quite a money. That actually the code originated by the other artist, and then the final artwork was produced by then another artist that actually explored the code of the other artist. Of course, the first artist, the creator of the code, gave it out, being aware that it can be used and abused for these kind of purposes, and actually he doesn't care. But on the other side, we know that no art is produced in a sterile environment, that artists influence each other, and there's only a question of ethics, who references who in the process. So it's the same as in science. Whatever you state needs a reference from another paper. Here in artwork, you need to reference other artworks or resources that you use. And unfortunately, some cases also end up on court. That's also a case. So it's like in the rest of the business, I would say. You have open models, closed models, end up on courts, and things like that.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a nice answer. And now I think comes the last from the forum. It's from Philip Fono. He has a question about creativity. Art is supposed to be the place for creativity and for human creativity. At one moment, you're speaking about serendipity, which require creativity and understanding. So far, AI, most promising technologies are deep learning, which is most about training the machines with massive set of data in a narrow field, for example, image. In what extent, I have to, one moment, my screen is fading. In what extent arts is also a room for machine creativity? Question mark. Or is it more about common sense? Question mark. So that was the question.
Yeah. I like this question. It's a very good one, actually, because the concept of serendipity was very popular, especially in the late last century. However, what we understand today, also in context of art, that it's a very material practice. So let's not idealize art process as the outcomes that emerge out of nothing or out of flesh and bliss and I don't know what. But what we observe in art as well as in science, that what you need are conditions. So you need institutions, you need equipment, you need collaborators, you need funding. So whenever you have conditions provided, you can develop relevant work. The thing is with the contemporary world is that it's quite complex. And if you want first to understand it, and second, react on these complexities, you need all these resources. And that's why the main challenge is not to go on a beach and wait for ideas to fall from sky, but to establish opportunities, and especially opportunities that reflect today's world, that is not a world of art or science or technologies or separately environment, but it's because that's the world of 20th century where all these domains were like fortresses, establishing themselves on differences. Today's world is more emerging through societal challenges, through environmental challenges that no domain can really neither understand, neither solve by itself. And that's why we promote all these opportunities and invest into opportunities that are emerging between sciences and technologies and environmental questions and artists, bringing all these different perspectives into mutually shared questions and to work on them together. I mean, this is where we find most of the creativity today in the beginning of the 21st century. Way more than having individual geniuses with sparking ideas. I mean, we don't find that much anymore.
Okay, thank you very much, Mia. I think we exhausted now the questions from the participants, and thank you everybody who participates today. And that I round up this session today. I mean, we are looking forward for a partnership. I'm now a little bit talking about the AI for You project. So I hope WAAG and you will make a challenge so artists can start to get into the open calls and get maybe some resources to try it out. And secondly, I would like to ask you the last question. If I would be now a technical partner, could I just also approach you directly as WAAG? Could I just ask you to become partner? Are you interested?
So we are completely open for all suggestions.
Okay.
Because that's what we do. But however, as mentioned, we need to provide conditions for this kind of research, for this kind of development and innovation. So it's the same as in technologies, as in science, it's also in arts. These conditions need to be established, and then we can develop new works like those presented. This is the frame within which we can really develop something completely new. Especially what I see in the context of AI for Europe is that it really has an opportunity to be a European platform presenting European values and not values of, let's say, American corporations or state-driven narratives, but really having an open society with open technologies where everything is discussed, understood, transparent, not being shy or afraid of concerns, but really developing AI in open society, I would say.
Great. Yes, thank you. I will now slowly close down this session, and once more